But one of the things that we want to talk a little bit about are the Freemasons. There is a great deal of controversy as to what really is Freemasonry and what role it had in the early years of America. And it's interesting that in January of 2007, House Resolution 33 in the first session of the 110th Congress recognized, quote, thousands of Freemasons in every state of the nation, close quote. So these issues of who's a Mason and who isn't actually has gotten into the congressional record. And as you study American history, it becomes quite clear to the students that guys like Benjamin Franklin and George Washington were active Freemasonry practitioners. John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, Paul Revere, Edmund Burke, John Hancock joined the names of the founders of the early pioneers, the strong men, if you will, of Freemasons, Albert Pike and Albert Mackey and Aleister Crowley. And the writings of Manly P. Hall are paramount in understanding the background. If you can get your hands on any of those books, they're astonishing is what they reveal about this private cult, if you will. Blavatsky, Pierre Lafont, the designer of Washington, was a Freemason. And so, for what it's worth, Teddy Roosevelt, William Taft, Warren G. Harding, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a Mason. Henry Wallace was not only a Mason, he's the reason that your dollar bill has these things that we're going to look at here in a minute. Harry Truman, Lyndon Johnson, James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, James Polk, James Buchanan, Andrew Johnson, James Garfield. Most of our previous presidents were all Masons. Now, what does that mean? Most people that only progress to maybe the third level, it's a social group that busies themselves in trying to do good socially. Like a lodge or the Rotaries or whatever. They're considered colorful but quite innocuous. But as you progress within Freemasonry, you gradually discover that there are aspects to it that are only revealed to those who have earned the right to know. So it starts to take on a whole different complexion. And I just, rather than get into a lot of that background, I just decided it's hard to find famous people who are not Freemasons. It's astonishing. Rudyard Kipling, he writes the books. And on it goes. It's amazing how many somehow at some level involve themselves in what's called Freemasonry. Now, many people in Freemasonry try to link their linkage back to Solomon's temple and make a big thing of that. But that's a blind spot. No, it actually goes all the way back to Babel, Genesis 11. And that embracing the occultic beliefs of the Rosicrucians and so forth. And Hiram Abiff was the first Grand Master of the Order of Masons, presumably. He was the chief architect of the Temple of Solomon, but it actually started much earlier than that. And but see, they package these things in innocuous, socially acceptable trappings. Most people in Freemasonry have no grasp. They do know that they're required to believe in a supreme being. Oh, that's wonderful. And the title they love to use of him is the great architect of the universe. Very popular label used by George Washington in his prayers and used very broadly to represent what you and I think of as God, right? Be careful. We discover much of their thinking comes from Francis Bacon. An occultic commitment to the new Atlantis that lurks behind the whole history of America, strangely enough. They felt that that's what they were doing. And we discover something else as you study speeches. There are certain code phrases that are used in contemporary speeches that you and I would miss unless you have a Freemasonry background. The angel that rides in the whirlwind and directs the storm. Really? Yes, this was used by President Bush in a speech. Sounds like just some fancy words, not to a Freemason. It's a code word of sorts. below the surface realities that may be, for political reasons, be hidden from the radar of civilians, while at the same time signaling the brokers of power concerning the real or deep or political or spiritual agenda at play. And when we had the war with Iraq and we had the shock and awe, remember? Shock and awe is a Hebrew term. Shock and awe was the English rendering of it. The mother of all bombs, remember that? That translates into Moab. You discover that some of these terms that are used in the press in a superficial way, a fire in the minds of men. There's a whole list of these code words that mean nothing to you unless you have a background in Freemasonry. Novus Ordo Seclorum, the New World Order. That's a term taken from the New Atlantis by Francis Bacon that shows up on your dollar bill. It's not a term of just recent politicians. To give you one example of the kinds of things you start running into chasing this sort of thing down, you discover the number 11 is one of those code words, strangely enough, okay? 11 represents a dark vision. Doubling that is the vision combined with action. Tripling it is the vision plus action, which means accomplishment. So they play with the numbers to carry a form of emphasis, if you will. What do I mean by that? Is it a coincidence, mere coincidence, that exactly 11 years to the date following George H.W. Bush's New World Order speech, and 11 years before 2012, that on September 11th, Flight 11 crashed into the Twin Towers? There's a lot of coincidences there, isn't there? What a coincidence. The Flight 11 crashed in the Twin Towers, whose appearance side by side not only formed a Masonic-like pillared gateway, but also architecturally depicted the number 11. Also consider that Flight 11 hit the Twin Towers first, and Flight 11 had how many crew members? 11. And New York, of course, was the 11th state added to the Union. The words New York City have 11 letters. Afghanistan, the first nation the U.S. attacked following 9/11, has 11 letters. Are these just coincidental? Are these just colorful coincidences? Possibly, frankly. And yet, within the cult of Freemasonry, this takes on profound significance because it's so predictable. The name George W. Bush has 11 letters. The words the Pentagon, which was also attacked on 9/11, has 11 letters. Why? And Flight 77 hit the Pentagon, which is located on the 77th meridian. And the foundation stone for the Pentagon was laid in 1941 on September 11th in a Masonic ceremony. Really? Is there something strange going on behind the scenes? Let me tell you something. Most of you know my background, and you know that I've been alarmed and concerned that we have a practicing Sunni Muslim in the White House. That's made me nervous. I've discovered something else that makes me even more nervous. I'm beginning to be convinced that he is being managed by occult managers. We all remember the inauguration where they had the Greek columns, that whole thing set up for the inauguration. Those aren't Greek columns, they are replicas of Nuremberg that Hitler had set up when he made his first speech. And it's all geared to the way Obama handled his inauguration. And you suddenly realize that's missed by most people, but it's not missed by anyone that has an occultic background. They're signals, they're confirmations. And the more you study his moves, the more you study the dates that he makes his key speeches and so forth and so on, you begin to get a sense that he is being managed by people who are following a profile of the occult. Babel, not Solomon's temple, it goes way back to Babel. The Rosicrucians, the Knights Templar, these all have their roots into the... And Adam Weishaupt, in May 1st of 1776, in his Illuminati, he merges that into the Freemasonry. And we discover, as you start studying these things, the pervasive social networks of mysticisms. The Rosicrucian is the forerunner of Masonry. That goes back to the 1300s. The secret mysteries of America's beginnings are explained by Sir Francis Bacon and traced from England following. Adam Weishaupt's Illuminati merged on the 1st of May of 1776, and that's on your dollar bill for some strange reason. The question that lurks behind some of these issues, is it possible that America was designed by the occultists to be the new Atlantis as specified by Francis Bacon back in the early days? That's a question. Well, when you take out your dollar bill, you'll discover there is the Great Seal of the United States on your dollar bill. Most of us are familiar with it if you've ever looked at it carefully. And there are elaborate explanations for each of the elements in terms of the 13 colonies and the founding of America, and that's all baloney. That's all been designed to hide the real meanings, interestingly enough. This was designed and accepted in 1782 by the Freemasons. It was influenced by European mysticism. It was put on the dollar bill in 1935 by Henry A. Wallace, the vice president under FDR. Wallace was fascinated by the occult, and he talked FDR into doing this. The Great Seal of the United States. Doesn't that look wonderful? That's not an eagle, by the way. Everybody thinks it is. No, it's a phoenix. It's the phoenix, the sun god Amun-Ra, celebrated by the Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Persians. An eagle sacred to the sun. It was also the symbol of the tribe of Dan, and there's a whole side issue there. It was also the living symbol of Mendes, a representative of the sun. 13 colonies, you say, right? 13 stars and 13 stripes and so forth, right? Is that really what they are? We notice in Latin there is e pluribus unum, out of many one. It's announcing something new. Okay, e pluribus unum, right? Out of many one. But when we examine the bird's feathers more carefully, on the right wing it has 32 wing feathers, and on the left one you have 33, celebrating the 32nd and 33rd Scottish rites of Freemasonry. That's the level at which you find out what's really going on. That isn't until you accede to that level you find out more about the one that you're worshiping. Up till then, he's the great architect of the universe. We'll come back to that in a minute. On the right, you have the 32, and on the left, you have the 33. But then you've got the tail feathers. Why are there 9 tail feathers on the... Because it represents the Council of 9 when the Illuminati was merged into the Freemasonry. Interesting. Well, let's take a look at the other side. Let's flip it over. It gets really, we quickly see the all-seeing eye, the open eye of Egypt. That's a symbol of Osiris, the men's eye of the Gnostics. We notice also that we have the 1776 date is blazoned at the base of the pyramid. That's the birth of the Illuminati by Adam Weishaupt, professor of law at the University of Ingolstadt in Bavaria, and merged into them at that time. And then we have this Annuit Corpus, announcing the birth of. See that top, the Annuit Corpus, that in Latin, it's the announcing the birth of. What's it announcing the birth of? Novus Order Seclorum, the new world order. That's a term out of The New Atlantis by Francis Bacon. It's not a term that was invented by recent politicians. It's a term that's picked up and celebrated by the current politicians. Wow. Novus Order Seclorum, the new order for the world, or the Seclorum. Okay. Well, of course, there is the Statue of Liberty, right? I suspect is the twilight's last gleaming that we're dealing with here. because we may be in a deeper spiritual warfare than you and I have any idea. What is the Statue of Liberty? It's the Masonic torch of enlightenment, as preserved in an ancient marble tablet still today in the Archaeological Museum of Corinth, in Corinth, Greece. It was presented in 1884 gift to the American Masons by the French Grand Orient Temple Masons. So the Masons gave it to the Masons as a gift. 151 statue of what? It's the sun god Apollo. It's presently, obviously, over one of the major ports of the world, wearing a toga, having a radiant crown of 7 spiked sun rays. It was designed and sculptured by Freemason Frederick Auguste Bartholdi. And it was manufactured for him by a French Freemason by the name of Gustave Eiffel, the guy that made the Eiffel Tower. Most people have no grasp of what was behind all that when that happened. But all through Freemasonry, the thing you discover that you're okay because you're going to celebrate the GAO2U. They have a war not against terrorism or communists or liberals. No. A spiritual war against the one true God, waged in the manifestation of an ancient pagan dream, of a usurper who calls himself the great architect of the universe. Really. His identity is only revealed at the senior levels, the 32nd and 33 degrees. And are they serious about keeping secrets? If you're in Freemasonry, you sign a blood oath. You're sworn to secrecy under blood oaths, which include having your throat slit, your eyeballs pierced, your tongues torn out, your feet flayed, and your bodies hacked into pieces and so on. Wow. And they celebrate that as part of their rituals. They take that seriously. Well, what secret are they keeping? What is it that you don't find out until you graduate to the top levels? Who is the GAOTU, the great architect of the universe? Who is he really? And here comes the shocker. It's none other than Satan himself. It's a form of Satan worship. And you only find that out if you've arrived at the top. It's something that incrementally is built. And all the stories and all the rationales are for the blue Freemasons, the ones that less than the third level and so on. The seed of the serpent. We started that with Genesis 3:15. Is it possible that genealogy may link Nimrod with Antiochus Epiphanes? Are they related maybe in some way we don't know? Or Titus Vespasian later, because there is some possibility that Titus Vespasian was a descendant from Antiochus Epiphanes somehow. But the coming world leader that we're looking for, I'll call him Nimrod II, right? Is it possible that we're going to go from Jurassic Park, if I could use that as a technology term, to the tomb of Nimrod? And I discovered in skimming some materials early this morning that I was quoted in one of these, so I decided to throw it into the picture here. Reference was made to Daniel 2:43. Remember, that's where Daniel is explaining to Nebuchadnezzar the meaning of the miry clay. Whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. As for the miry clay, he switches to a personal pronoun, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. That requires the they to be something other than the seed of men. You can't escape it, biologically or grammatically. There it is. Clear, crisp. I was quite intrigued to see that this was referenced to me in Tom Horn's book, Zenith 2016. One of the things on your reading list, if you're interested in following up, Tom Horn wrote a book, Apollyon Rising 2012. He has taken that book and upgraded it. He calls it Zenith 2016. And I've been skimming through it just to get up to speed on some of the things that we've been talking about over the last few weeks. I was quite startled to find myself quoted in that reference to this thing here. Who are these non-seed, the Zerah, the offspring or descendants? See, Satan has a seed just as the woman had a seed in Genesis 3:15. Satan has seed, and it is at enmity with Jesus Christ. Let's understand that. Let's not lose sight of that. But there's two reading places that I encourage you to read in your quiet time. Read Joel chapter 2, first 11 verses, and read Revelation 9, the first 11 verses. It's all about locusts, but it's not the locusts you're thinking of, because these locusts have a king. Proverbs 30, verse 27 tells us the natural locusts have no king. Why does it say that? Why? So that in Joel and Revelation 9, you'll realize when he's using the locust as a metaphor. And when you read those, you'll quickly realize we're not talking about insects. We're talking about demons. And so graphic, it will make you very uncomfortable. You want to talk about Nephilim? Are they around? Joel will describe them for you. Are Nephilim going to show up at the end times? Read Revelation 9 and come to your own conclusions. We're going to go from Jurassic Park to the tomb of Nimrod is the suggestion. And I was quite surprised to see Tom, I'm quoting from his book, page 237. It says, Chuck Missler raised the appropriate question not long ago when he asked, quote, could it be that this final world dictator will be, in some sense, a return to Nimrod? I frankly had forgotten that was in the book. Since there, I thought I'd just plagiarize myself by quoting that. Yeah. It goes on. In 1998, Zahi Hawass, who was the current Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, claimed to have found the burial tomb of the god Osiris, or Apollo, or Nimrod, he goes by those names, at the Giza Plateau. He believed they discovered the body of Nimrod. Well, clearly some very powerful Egyptologists believe that Osiris was a historical figure and that his body was stored somewhere at or near the Great Pyramid. That's interesting. Now, one of the prominent writers of Freemasonry, of course, is Manly P. Hall. I used to have some of his books. They were stolen, unfortunately, but they're very, very fundamental to Freemasonry. Manly P. Hall, who knew the Masonic legend of Hiram Abif, was a thinly veiled prophecy of the resurrection of Osiris, may have understood what Zahi Hawass was looking for and why he was looking for it. Manly P. Hall writes as follows on page 104 of the Secret Teaching of All Ages. The dying God shall rise again. The secret room in the house of the hidden places shall be rediscovered. The pyramid again shall stand as the ideal emblem of solidarity, inspiration, aspiration, resurrection, and regeneration. That's a quote out of Manly P. Hall himself. You see, you need to understand that Nimrod was a rebel who allowed himself to be worshipped as God. After the flood, his rebellion became the foundation of mankind's greatest religious apostasy. Sown through the generations, this system of false worship became known simply as the Babylonian mystery religion. So this should help tie a few loose ends for you. One of the classic studies of Babylon was by Alexander Hislop. And in his classic text, The Two Babylons, he's talking about a literal Babylon and mystery Babylon as the pair, states that the Babylonian mystery religion was based on the worship of Nimrod. It was to glorify Nimrod that the whole Chaldean system of iniquity was formed. Well, we could go on and on about this, but we've talked enough about this thing. There are dangers of all of this, and the primary dangers come from ignoring the metacosm. These people dabbling in Freemasonry are playing with fire. It is vastly more dangerous than they have any idea, because they really, Paul identifies, they are worshiping demons. See, the metacosm is the real reality, not this physical simulation that we live in. we're paying attention to science, we understand that this is a shadow of a larger reality indeed. That larger reality I'm calling, for lack of a better term, the metacosm. That's the real reality, and the one that we perceive is just a virtual one. You and I are in the midst of a cosmic warfare. And in that warfare, we're both the pawns and the prizes. Our eternal destinies are in jeopardy by our behavior. And one of the questions as we wrap up our gathering here is, what is your action plan? We've had a lot of interesting notes. You've got some things to take home, to put on your shelf. We've had a little fun. We've had some fellowship. What needs to come out of this weekend is a personal action commitment on your part between you and the King you serve. Amen. Amen is right.